If you talked about the unconscious at a congressional hearing, they'd look at you like you were insane. If you talked to them, if you mentioned the word love at a Senate hearing, they'd look at you like you're Oprah. People, when we do politics, what we do is we talk about accountability, we talk about funding, and we talk about appropriations, and we talk about things that we can measure numerically. Yet the things that are happening in the unconscious that really do shape people's minds are things that are hard to measure, that are unconscious, that are extremely emotional, that are extremely relationship-based. And so even as I've been watching this presidential campaign, when you talk about the candidates describing why students don't complete college, they'll say, we have to have more college loans. And that's true. We have to have more college age, and that's true. But only 8% of students who drop out of college do so for financial reasons. The main reason they do it is because they're emotionally disengaged from the school, they're emotionally disengaged from the people around them. And if you don't have mentors and relationships, then none of those programs are going to work. And to me, when I look at cognition, I now don't see it as a cold, rational thing that is really directed by incentives in any clear way. I think of the power of the unconscious categories that are in the mind that help us perceive reality. I think of the power of emotion in drawing us this way and that. I think of the power of groups and how they mold the mind. We're now at a moment where everyone talks about globalization. India and China are thought to be, the rising force changing our world. I really don't believe that's the most important thing happening in the world right now. This is a global economy. It's been a global economy for 100 years. The number of jobs that have been lost due to outsourcing to China and India may be 1 or 5 or 10% of the whole global economy. But the real source of the change is not the rise of China and India. It's the transformation from a physical economy to a human capital economy and our inability to understand what really makes human capital. And so to me, as I look forward, I think what we need is a new vocabulary for human capital. What really builds it, the emotional components, the unconscious components. We need a new set of policies that really fixate on relationships. And when you look at education, the one thing we know is that changing the structure of a school doesn't really matter. The one thing that really matters is the nature of a relationship between a student and a teacher and that emotional bond. If you look back at your schooling, I doubt you remember much of what you learned in school. You probably remember some of the teachers you learned from and what they were like. And so we require a new grammar, a new vocabulary that takes into account what we're learning from this scientific revolution. And finally, I'll just end with one final thought, more political, what I do in my daytime life. And that has to do with looking at the candidates. When we look and measure the character of the candidates, we tend to look at experience, we tend to look at all the things that we look at, the policies, how they do in a debate or how they give a speech. But watching this last president, one of the things that really strikes me is the incredible power of mental landscapes, of unconscious categories. I get to interview President Bush every 4 or 5 months, maybe a little more than Arianna Huffington, who's also here. And one of the things that strikes you about President Bush, his extreme self-confidence is one of them, but another is that when he sees his role as a leader, he sees leadership as looking 50 years in the future. I'm not sure he's ever thought about that, but he's less interested in the next week. And that's just a mental landscape that's in his mind. When you think about Barack Obama, one of the things you see is this tremendous ability he has for mindsight, to read and understand other people's minds. Everyone who's worked with him has the story to tell of where he perceived something they were doing better than they perceived it themselves. My little story involves, I was writing some columns a few years ago attacking the Republican Congress, and I would throw in a few sentences attacking the Democrats to make myself feel good. And one morning I got an email from Obama and it said, David, if you want to attack us, fine, but you're only throwing in those sentences to make yourself feel good. And that's a skill. McCain also has a subconscious, I think, awareness of a moral system that he could not articulate. But it's a moral system that is pre-Christian. And I don't say that because he's older, actually, than Christ. But it's built on an honor code, which is classical. The belief in honor, in courage, in duty, and sacrificing oneself for one country. And if you sat him down, and believe me, I've tried, and said, what drives you? What's your moral sensibility? He He couldn't articulate it for you, but these things do guide him. And so really I'm just trying to apply some of the research that's being done that's sort of half-formed in my mind of how people succeed into the political world. And the need to get deeper and really understand what's happening in the elephant and not just on the things that we talk about on TV pundit shows. So thank you for your attention.